Have you heard the phrase slow down to speed up? The idea is that by deliberately reducing the pace, leaders can make better decisions and deliver stronger results over time. But can it really be true in senior leadership when everything feels so urgent? In this episode, I'm joined by Alex Hems to explore how slowing down as a leader can lead to better decisions, stronger teams, and clearer direction when it matters most. Welcome to the Independent School Podcast with me, Juliet Corbett. I'm a trusted advisor, executive coach and strategist, working with accomplished leaders who are navigating complex challenges, the kind that can feel like a tangled ball of string, confusing, frustrating, and hard to unpick. In this new series, I bring you real-world conversations with principals, heads, and CEOs of independent and international schools. Together, we explore problem-solving in uncertainty, staying strategic amidst the daily bustle of leadership, and building high-performing teams. Today, I'm joined by Alex Hems, Executive Head of Aldenham Foundation. Alex read English at Oxford and started her teaching career at Allen School in South London. From there, she moved into all-girls education, working at St Paul's Girls' School, North London Collegiate School, Francis Holland Sloane Square, and Wickham Abbey. Her first headship was at St George's in Edinburgh, and then she returned south and back into co-education after 5.5 very happy years in Scotland. She took up the executive head role at Aldenham Foundation in 2022. There she brings together a deep educational experience with a really strong sense of stewardship and purpose. Alex is also one of my fabulous clients, and in this conversation we explore leadership decision-making from the inside out, including intuition, trust, and knowing when to slow the pace to improve clarity and impact. We talk about leading through uncertainty, building teams who are confident enough to challenge, and creating space to think well, both individually and collectively, especially when the stakes are high. It's a thoughtful and honest conversation, so I hope you enjoy my interview with Alex Hems. So hello, Alex, and welcome to the Independent School Podcast. It's fantastic to have you here.
Morning, Juliet. It's really lovely to be with you. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to this interview because I know that you have such a deep passion for education. Mm-hmm. And we've known each other for a couple of years now and worked with each other on and off in that time as well. I'd be delighted if you could share, first of all, what's that root of that really deep commitment and passion that you have for the education sector? What caused you to forge a career in this area?
Yes, I think it's something I think back on quite a bit. I mean, it really does go all the way back to the point when I was making decisions about where to go with my working life. And I was in my final year at university, and a friend who I knew very, very well just came in and sat down in my room and said, "I've decided I'm going to go and do a PGCE." And she still had another year to go, and we were quite late on in our final year at that point, and I hadn't really firmed up my plans. And when she said it, it was literally like the pieces of a puzzle slotting into place in the right position in my head. And I could almost hear a click. Wow. And I'd been going around in circles with applications for all kinds of things that I was never going to be any good at. And the thought of having, if I had even set foot in a corporate law firm or any of it, it would have been a complete disaster. And when she said that, it just felt so right. And it brought me right back to where I had been when I was younger. And so, in fact, we went to Cambridge, we did our PGCEs together. Before that, I spent a year working in Switzerland as a language assistant, trying out my very, very much untutored skills in education at that stage on small children, and it was perfect. And I guess the thing that sort of kept me fired up for so long was the desire to convey my love of English and literature, and I was lucky enough to work in schools that enabled me to really indulge my passion for Milton and Chaucer and sort of Shakespeare, etc., and have a lot of fun with that. And that's where it started. And then I think as I've moved through different sort of areas of education and moved into different roles, it's become an increasingly deep-seated commitment to making sure that no child is missing out in the school that I'm working in, and that initially, obviously, that would start with my class, but then gradually, that is now my driving passion as a head, to make sure that we are not missing the potential of someone in the school in some way or another.
So that's really interesting. So it grew from a gut feeling, kind of intuition of, oh yes, that feels right. Did you know at that moment that feels right because, and then you could articulate it, or was it just a sense that this feels like this is what I should be doing?
The latter, I think. I had as a child, I had taught lessons to my toys and things like that, and they used to get awards at the end of term, and
fantastic.
It was all quite organised. I've obviously been institutionalised from an early age, I think. But so it just felt as at that stage initially in that conversation in 1991, it probably felt just like sort of slotting back into what felt right and comfortable. But that has proved to be the right thing to have done.
We might loop back into this later in our conversation, actually, but that moment of just knowing what feels right, that gut instinct or intuition, is really important to learn. To learn to hear it, and then you can use your common sense to decide whether to follow it or not. But that's really, really inspirational. Fantastic. So what I'd love to dive into in this conversation is the fact that our default as a society is probably the same as our default in leadership, which is more is better. We've got to go faster. If we're trying to deliver big results, we need to really pick up the pace and to think about actually sometimes the opposite is what's needed. Sometimes we need to slow down to speed up. I'd love to explore that with you. I guess my first question is, when did you first get a sense that there might be some truth in that? If we slow down, we can actually speed up with the results that we're trying to deliver.
So I don't think that I would have articulated it like that to myself, but subsequently, when I've come across that idea, and we've talked about that in the past, it's made sense because of things that potentially times when it's almost been forced on me, but that has helped. So I was in my previous headship, I was living in Scotland, in Edinburgh, and surrounded by the most beautiful countryside, very close to the city. So it was an absolute commitment. Every weekend we went out walking. And I began to find that was really valuable time for me to chew over a problem in my mind. And so although it didn't feel like taking my work out on the walk with me, I could be striding across the Pentlands and really enjoying being where I was, but would find that in that space, without the telephone and without the emails popping in, etc., if I just let it sit there in the back of my mind, answers started to generate themselves. And that became something I then tuned into. And thought, actually, sometimes I really do need to give myself that space. And time.
It's interesting, isn't it? I've experienced that when I've walked solo and when I've walked with someone else and we're talking about something completely irrelevant as well. Even then, the solution can just seem clearer to whatever it is that's the challenge that I'm facing at the end of that time. It's really interesting. It's been named. There's an author called Cal Newport. He's written a couple of books that are really, really good. One called Slow Productivity, which touches on some of these ideas. He calls it productive meditation. Now, it's not really meditation in the official kind of definition of it, but the idea being that if you place in your mind before you do a walk or some kind of physical activity that's going to kind of take you out of yourself and into your body, that by placing a challenge in your mind beforehand, not really working on it, but then just having curiosity at the end of, okay, what does that look like now? It is a common experience that you're describing, that actually it is possible to find something deeper, whether it's intuition, experience, doesn't really matter what you name it, that emerges during that time.
Even within the working day, I do find at school that if I might be struggling over something, usually how to express something maybe that's going to be a bit tricky, or actually just trying to muster all the threads to make a decision. And I have come to know that if I get up, walk away from it for a while, and actually just walk around the school a little bit, then quite often, even before I'm out of my office door, something is clearer in my head.
Yeah.
There's something about physically standing up and moving that makes a difference.
Yes.
And it's not necessarily the slowing down, but it's being comfortable to say, I don't need to make this decision right now.
Yeah.
I'm just going to let that sit for a bit, and go out and chat to a couple of people and lower the intensity of the thinking around it and the pressure to make that decision.
Yeah, there's something. Yes, the pace of the thinking. Our thinking is one of our strongest tools. That cognitive ability in leadership is critically important to be able to really think through and analyze complex and uncertain scenarios. But sometimes actually just more thinking isn't what you need. It's, as you say, if you reduce the intensity of the thinking, and then often, as you say, moving your body can be part of that to take us out of just a thinking kind of process, then that is, the intensity might reduce, but the really important things just float up to the surface, and then it becomes clearer what the next step is.
No, I've definitely found that.
So I'm fascinated about what it is that slowing down the pace or reducing the intensity allows us to do. So one of the things you've mentioned there is the threads coming together for a decision. So I think that's almost like it's time for the meaning to emerge within all the patterns that we're seeing. There's something really important about it happening alongside other people as well, isn't there? So if you're in let's say a senior leadership team meeting, and you're saying, actually, let's not rush to a decision here, let's explore a few different angles we might not have seen, without sharing anything confidential, because clearly we know heads are dealing with a lot of confidential information. Are you able to explain to us the feeling of when you've actually made the decision, actually, as the chair of this meeting, I need to slow this down, I need us to think about this from different angles? What does it feel like in that moment when you push against the tendency that we have for pace?
There've definitely been a couple of times. I mean, I can think back to COVID, for example, that period of very intense decision making that we were, as heads, we were all doing particularly in those first few weeks, when there was a lot of guidance coming out. But obviously you had to map that onto your own school and think about the best way to communicate things, and work with the pace of your own people as well. And I do remember one particular meeting, and I had the most wonderful team who were they had really grasped the need that I had asked them all to become experts in their particular area. I said, I cannot know all the bits that you need to know, but I'm trusting you to go away and read the bits that apply to you, and etc. And at one point we were having to work out how to manage a return period of students, but we only had X number of days that they could all come in for, and it was all quite complicated. And my team had been absolutely brilliant, and I proposed something, and I could feel, and we were meeting online as well, and I could feel even coming off the screen at me, I could feel their resistance to that. And because we had worked so closely and so effectively, I could tell quite quickly that this had not landed well with them. Some way or another, I had got it wrong. I had miscalculated what the school could cope with, or their capacity at that point. And it was a Friday afternoon, and I was really desperate to get that decision through. I really wanted to get communication out about it, and I felt that was quite important. But equally, I knew that they were the ones who were going to have to make it work. And so and no one said a word. No one said, no, Alex, we're not doing this. What an extraordinary idea. but I could tell because they were just sitting looking a little bit nonplussed, and not even the ones who would normally give me a little smile of encouragement, nothing. And I thought, okay, I have to listen to this now. And I said, okay, fine, okay, we'll come back on Monday morning. And we fixed a time to meet, and we fixed certain things we would look at, and then we finished the meeting.
Yeah.
And that was hard for me, because I felt it was very important to get that communication out, but it was only important if it was the communication that was going to work.
Yes. I think there's an element within us of our own monologue sometimes telling us that we need to speed up, we need to get the communication out. Of course, clear communication to parents, especially at that phase of the pandemic, is critically important, but clear communication of a decision that isn't really going to work, it doesn't serve anybody. So it is the self-awareness that you can have, and I do think this is a learned skill. I guess some people are more self-aware than others, but I think this is a learned skill of realizing that actually I'm trying to push too much here. I need to step back and let things just happen at a slightly slower pace, and trust that either the end result will be better, or even if we loop back to the same decision, people will be bought in a way they wouldn't have been if, as the leader, I had just pushed.
Sure.
At this point, it is self-awareness, isn't it? Knowing when to step back.
Yes. And I mean, I guess that was helped by the fact that we knew each other so well.
Yes.
And yeah, it was important to listen to that.
Yeah, absolutely. The other element of why slowing down can work in some situations, and we'll talk in a few minutes about when it might not work, but the other reason I think it works is because it allows us to see what the real priorities are, and therefore sharpen our strategic focus. So we're trying to do a smaller number of things now, at least. We might pace some things to happen later, but doing a smaller number of things, but actually doing the right things that are going to get the biggest impact, and doing them really well. And they may be the courageous things to do as well. But there's something about when we slow down, we can see what's actually really important, what's going to get us to that shared goal faster.
Yes.
And I wonder whether, is that something that you found, that actually by reducing the number of things we're focusing on in a team, it can help to speed up the results?
Yes, I think so. I think there have been times when I have said, when maybe we were looking ahead into a period where there was quite a bit going on for the school. Not all challenging, but just a lot of stuff happening. And a couple of times when I have just said, right, we are in our meetings for the next couple of weeks, we're just going to focus on these strands. And if what we're needing to talk about doesn't, or what we think we ought to be talking about doesn't come under those headings, we're going to deal with it somewhere else.
Yeah.
Or and that has been helpful, just to allow people to see that we are going to give proper time to discussing some of the things that are properly important.
Yeah.
And just giving them that space. And sometimes that has meant having to say to people, no, we're not going to look at that in this meeting. I'm happy to have a chat with you separately about it, but we're not going to give this meeting to those items.
Yeah. It's that classic urgent, important clarification.
Yes,
isn't
exactly.
it? That the urgent can crowd out the important if we let it.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Indeed. And I've become conscious. I've been, and this is, I mean, it is a classic example of the slowing down to speed up. We've when I have a break at the end of a term, I usually have a couple of days when I can barely string a few words together, but then I start to rise from the morass, and because I've stepped back and the constant flood of emails has slowed down, and I've taken some time to have a weekend with my family and things like that, I can then come back in and find it's a really, really good time to have a longer chat with some wise colleagues, and I'm lucky we live on site, so there are often people around, and just having those conversations where you both have time to let things surface without thinking, actually, I've still got 4 more points on this agenda we've got to get through before break time or whatever. And really chewing things over that way has been so valuable, and has allowed me to, because of the way their questions, they're asking me things sometimes, well, what are you thinking about doing next term with X or Y, and how are we going to move forward with that? So they've nudged me into thinking about things that I've then actually had time to explore properly. And that, so I think while I benefit enormously from being on my own to recharge, the presence of one or two people at a time to just nudge and encourage and stimulate thinking, I found enormously helpful as well.
Yeah. I sometimes make the mistake of talking about making time to think, and I think people assume I'm talking about it solo thinking, and that's obviously can be very important. But as you've just shared there, actually, it's the power of 2 or 3 brains without a particular time frame or set agenda when we need to move on to the next point. And I think your comment about the thoughts that surface, or letting the thinking surface, actually that encapsulates quite a lot. There's a sense that the things that surface might be different when we don't have quite the same intensity of we've got to get this agenda point to a decision in order to move on to the next item. And actually it's different thinking surfaces when the pace is different, doesn't it?
Yes, exactly. I think that the challenge is trying to weave those moments into the intensity of term time.
Yes.
That is challenging.
Yeah.
And I'm lucky to have colleagues who are happy to catch up out of term time in that sort of way. But I'm often conscious, particularly as the term draws to its end, that agendas become increasingly operational. And because there is a lot of operational detail to get right, of course, and if clarifying certain things before end of term arrangements go out is really important. But actually thinking, no, these meetings are too precious, and we've got all the most well-informed minds in the school around this table. We should not be spending time on thinking about which year group is going to go into lunch first for school lunch, for Christmas lunch or whatever it is. That's just not right. That conversation needs to take place elsewhere, in a properly operational meeting. And this meeting, even if let's say we're coming towards that in that end of term stage, you can still capture thoughts about, actually, these are a few things I would like you to be thinking about over Christmas when you have, or, over the holiday period when you've got your time. It's really, really important to just target 2 or 3 areas maybe that is useful to look at.
One of the things I find interesting is that a lot of the time in the corporate world, especially actually in the tech world, they're using what they would call a sprint kind of technique. So they would sprint really active for, I don't know, 6 weeks or so, and then they'd have a small pause, and then they would sprint again towards the next set of goals. What I find really interesting is that this is what schools have always done. I know there were many debates, in different parts of the world around actually our school terms were often based on what used to be kind of an agricultural timetable of the calendar of the year. Is that still useful? Big question. But actually this idea of there being a sprint and a rest actually does work quite well for most things. In fact, I'll put Cal Newport's book link to slow productivity in the episode notes. It's really important around this. He talks about working at a natural pace, and he talks a lot about seasonality. And he's obviously speaking, he's an academic in academia, so he has it, but he's speaking to a sector, a wide group of sectors when he's writing. He's saying actually a lot of places have lost this seasonality, but actually schools have kept it, this sense of sprint and rest. And what's interesting is that to some extent, of course you are right, that we shouldn't be using really kind of high level strategic meetings to talk about operational details. Undoubtedly those things should be discussed separately. But actually, it might be that there is a point in the termly cycle that inevitably we're going to be a bit less strategic, and we're going to be a little bit more operational, and that's okay. So what you described actually was almost like seeding people with
Yes.
thoughts of, well, you don't have time for this now, but
No,
let's
quite.
just keep a note. We're going to think about this together when
Yes.
things calm down a little bit. Yeah,
Mm.
interesting.
And I think when I see it myself, as when I am unable to see that things have become too operational, that's I've experience now of many years round this block has shown me that's when I am then getting too tired.
Yes.
And I have to find some sort of way of changing it up again.
Yeah.
That's been quite telling as well.
Yeah, it's almost like a trigger, isn't it? When I can't do this, or when I do this automatically without thinking about it, when I naturally slip into operational without even questioning it,
Yes,
that signals to me I'm too tired. It's knowing our own little signals for when we need to then restore ourselves, which doesn't necessarily mean doing nothing, but means doing something that's going to really energize us as well.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
So there might be some points in the annual cycle where actually slowing down isn't really an option. There are also other times maybe when actually slow down to speed up isn't what's needed. Actually, pace is needed. I'm sure you've experienced a few of those, maybe around COVID, or particular decisions that need to be made quite quickly.
Yes, and indeed, and I think then what I have found immensely helpful is knowing who to get into the room. They're always, you've always got lots of voices in your head of the different stakeholders, and you're very often thinking, well, how will this land with parents? How will this land with the staff? You obviously you may well in some situations have a student involved, a young person whose life is affected by the decision you make, and those sorts of more emotional concerns. Sometimes you're trying to protect the institution against potentially an appeal against your decision, and making sure you've worded things properly and all that kind of thing. So you've got all those different voices sort of playing in the scenario. And again, sometimes you do have to make the decision at a certain amount of speed, but I do think it's getting the right people again with you, and I guess those right people are not always the people who will agree with you, but who are prepared to inject challenge.
Yes.
And that I have always found immensely helpful.
Yeah.
And the other element that I have found really key, and I remember this from a very wise head who I worked with a long time ago. After she had been through a decision-making process, I said to her, what guides you through these moments? And she said, at the moment when you're making a decision, you have to think, if there's a student involved, it has to be what is in their best interest. Whatever else is going on, it has to be what is in the best interest of the child. And if it is not a specifically individual issue, what is in the best interest of the school? And your job is to put the school first, and not maybe individuals with loud voices.
Yeah.
And those principles have always helped me. Yeah. They don't always apply, but mainly I think they do. That's our job as heads, to be the sort of the steward and the guardian of the institution, not allowing the institution to get the better of the individual if the individual is the person at the heart of the situation, but thinking in terms of that longer term picture, I guess, is important.
So I really like that, because what you've articulated is a kind of a framework that you may or may not have actually realized you're using, but a framework that allows you, when there is a decision that needs to be made at speed and the pace is important, it's getting multiple voices that aren't necessarily going to agree. So you've got those stakeholder kind of, not necessarily representatives, because it's quite a lot of weight to place on someone's shoulders to represent a stakeholder group.
But just wise people
who have different viewpoints on how an institution works, or on a situation that's being considered. So it almost accelerates the process of the thinking by getting multiple voices together in that way. And then secondly, to have some kind of decision heuristics to have a sense of this is the shortcut that I'm going to use to frame this decision. The first one being the child is all at the centre. The second one being if there isn't an individual child,
Yes.
Being affected by this decision, then it's the school that's at the centre, and the future longevity and the impact that the school can have with you as the steward of the school. So it may be that other people might have different rules. That's fine. Not everyone will have the same rule, but some sense that this is the filter through which we make this decision.
Yes, because in the end, you have to find a filter, don't you? You have to. I remember someone saying to me, a lawyer trying to sort of help me make a decision on one occasion, said, "You could go either way, but in the end, you've got to back one of these, Alex, and just then follow it."
Yeah, exactly.
And that was helpful as well, actually.
Exactly. And I think one of the things that I'm noticing is that we've always lived in a complex environment. Wherever there's people involved, there's complexity. We can't always predict how people are going to respond. But that with the geopolitics becoming more complex, economically, we're more bound in to a much larger system that's really unpredictable. And that we've seen that through, global crises in the financial sector over the last decades. But then also as the high stakes elements of the decisions that we're making because of the pressures, especially in the UK independent school sector with financial pressure, that it's increasing the complexity that we're dealing with. And so there isn't likely to be a right or wrong answer. And to be honest, if a decision has come up to the head and the senior leadership team is spending time on it, I would almost bet there isn't a right or wrong answer because you'd have figured it out before then if it was. So when there's a complexity involved and an unpredictability, uncertainty, you're right. There isn't going to be a right or wrong. You could go with either of these two choices or maybe even more choices on the table. But I think whatever you decide, you then have to back it and you have to back yourself. The rest of the team has collective responsibility and backs it as well. Yeah, really important.
The other process I have found helpful is to envisage and even to start trying to write a communication of that decision. And I've found that if I cannot envisage myself standing up and delivering that decision to an audience, then it clearly doesn't feel right.
Yeah.
And I've had to convey some very, very unpalatable decisions to audiences, but I've been able to muscle through because while clearly they weren't happy with what they were hearing, nonetheless, it was my feeling that having gone through that sort of process that we described, I believed it was nonetheless the right decision to make in that moment. And
absolutely.
That is helpful then. But for me, that process of trying to envisage writing or delivering the communication is crucial.
That's really interesting. I think there might be two elements of that. Maybe, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's an element of many of us think through writing. So if we can write it out, we're kind of testing the logical flow of an argument. And if there's gaps and it feels a bit flaky in places, that's because we haven't quite got the logic there. So there's a thinking through writing process. And I think there's a test there. The fact that you said you're visualizing it, I think there's an emotion test of, do my values, do our school's values, does what we put central, do I feel a confidence in conveying this? And you're kind of tapping into something which is more heart and less head in that moment.
Yes, if there feels as though there's a conflict in my personal integrity, or my professional integrity as the head in delivering that message, then it's something's not quite right there.
Yeah. And as you said back at the beginning, it's that knowing to trust that little feeling.
Yes, absolutely.
And looping back through to the beginning of our conversation, you trusted that feeling that it felt right to go to your PGCE. And it is the ability that slowing down gives us to hear that intuition and to increasingly trust the intuition as well.
No, absolutely.
Fascinating conversation. Thank you for spending some time with us, Alex. I'd love to wrap up with one question. Inevitably, when people are listening to these, there's a lot of different ideas that we've shared. If there was one key thing that you'd like someone to take away as they're listening to this conversation, what feels like it's the central crux of this?
That's a very good question. I think so much of my experience has shown me that yes, as a head, you have to, in the end, you have to be the person who makes the decision, and you will probably be the person who has to communicate that decision. But it is very foolish to believe that you can do all of that alone. And that's where I've really, really valued the teams I've worked with. And it was one of when in my previous role, I had the opportunity to appoint a senior deputy head. And one of the questions I asked was, if you disagree with me, will you feel confident to tell me? As that is so important. And that is something I've always really, really stuck to, that I have to have people around me who will be confident to disagree, not just for the sake of it, but because they can see the principle at stake and how important it is to articulate a valuable perspective. So I think for heads, particularly anyone who is thinking about headship, I think it is the most wonderful role to have. I'm coming up to I'm in my 9th year, I think, as a head now in 2 different roles. And it wasn't ever something I envisaged doing. I didn't start my career thinking, I want to be a head by the time I'm X age. But it is the role that gives you the most capacity to bring about the changes that you want to see in education. Even on the scale of your own school, and it is an absolutely fabulous job, but don't try and do it alone.
Yeah,
trust your teams and take the opportunity to build those amazing teams with the people you have around you.
Yeah. This is one of the reasons I love our conversations, Alex. It's the passion that you bring and the fact that you're doing it for the impact, and the wisdom to know you can't do this all yourself and no one expects you to. So it's finding those ways to find the support and find the imagination of others, the creativity of others. That's what really makes it rewarding.
Yes, exactly.
Fantastic.
They have far better ideas most of the time.
Thank you so much, Alex, for the time you spent with us today. It's been wonderful to have you here.
Thank you. It's been a real pleasure, Juliet. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Independent School Podcast. If you found today's conversation valuable, I invite you to join my email list and hear more of my fresh thinking on leading strategically through complexity and uncertainty. Visit www.consultjuliet.co.uk/sign up. Remember, the biggest challenges you face are rarely solved by working harder. They're solved by thinking differently, with the right trusted advisor in your corner. While I work with leaders across many sectors, my heart and more than 2 decades of experience remain deeply rooted in education. If you're ready to turn complexity into progress, sharpen your focus, and lead a happier, higher performing team, I'd love to start a conversation about how we could work together. Just reach out anytime. And don't forget, the clearest insights often appear when you gift yourself a moment to slow down and let your best thinking surface.